Welcome to Executive Insights. My guest today is Ross Davidson, Interim CIO and IT Special Advisor with Toronto Parking Authority. In this episode, Ross shares how his early experience as a volunteer overseas has shaped him as a person. He also reflects on his journey from entrepreneurship to a corporate executive and the lessons he learned along the way. We discuss Ross's mandate with Toronto Parking Authority, and he offers helpful advice to his CIO peers who are trying to strike the balance between running the business of IT and driving innovation. Lastly, Ross tells me that he has worked for more women than men in his career and has gained a valuable insight. Hi, Ross. Thank you for joining me today and welcome to Executive Insights.
Good morning, Nasheen. Thank you very much for having me here today.
In an earlier conversation, you talked about working as a volunteer overseas twice in the 90s with the Canadian International Development Agency. I found your story so fascinating. How did those early experiences shape you as a person?
Well, Nasheen, if I was writing a book or a screenplay, and I've often thought about it, I'd probably say something profound like, I left a boy and came back a man. Or looking down to see a Malayan pit viper curl itself around my boot, I really knew I was on my own for the very first time in my life. And while the story about the Malayan pit viper is true, and I was on my own left working in the fields during my third week in Thailand, I think I was too young at the time, and even a couple of years later working in South America, to really understand how fundamentally the experiences that I was going through were shaping me as a person. I mean, for my first experience being put in a country where I was alone, the only foreigner in a 5-6 hour drive where I didn't know the language, was given a bamboo hut with no electricity to live in while 19 years of age, was, to say the very least, a very eye-opening and life-changing experience. You really don't get a chance to think about what it does to you much at the time because all of your senses are completely overloaded with everything new going on around you and a brain that hurts just trying to make your simplest thoughts and wishes understood. For me, it was only years later, once I'd grown up a little and became smart enough to realize that I wasn't as smart as I always thought I was, that I really came to appreciate the positive changes that I experienced in my time overseas. Some of the greatest ways that shaped me and have helped me the most, both as a person and in my career, were learning to appreciate the little things in life. I mean, living as part of a hill tribe village in the mountains, it was amazing to see how happy people who, to my mind, had absolutely nothing could be and find such immense joy from something so little like a lollipop that was given out by the doctors who came by to visit monthly. I think another one was learning to say yes to new experiences. I mean, after days of frustration, trying to make myself understood, trying to understand what people were saying to me, I finally just gave up and said yes to everything, regardless of whether it was a question or not. The things I saw, the places I went, the things I did just by saying yes, and some of them were a little bit scary, were some of the most amazing that I will hold to my heart for the rest of my life. I think another one is learning not to take yourself so seriously. I mean, finding yourself in a situation where even a 4-year-old kid knows more than you can be real humbling and a source of laughter for others around you. Learning to laugh at yourself and accept your lack of knowledge of something is extremely enlightening and an opportunity to improve, I found. Learning to listen. I mean, not being able to understand anyone for the longest time taught me to really listen hard, especially where the same word can mean 5 different things depending on the tone that's used and the cadence. So my experiences really taught me to actively listen to others and not just the words they say. And I think mostly it improved my abilities at solving problems and critical thinking. I mean, every day it seems I face new challenges and experience, the likes of which I'd never seen before. Sometimes it was having to do something like build a new house. And I'm thinking of a time we built a new structure for the village chickens with only axes as a tool. No nails, no hammers, no saws, no nothing. And you really learn to think outside of your normal box so many times and in so many different ways.
Wow, such valuable lessons, and I really appreciate your sharing them. I think it's very interesting. I always remember Steve Jobs once said that you can only connect the dots backwards. And that is so true when we reflect on our past, on our journey, and how much we can learn about ourselves. Continuing down the reflection lane, you started your career as an entrepreneur for so many years until you sold your company and joined IBM. How did your early days as an entrepreneur prepare you for your corporate career and often having to lead in a highly complex environment?
Being an entrepreneur is one of the most exciting and at times terrifying career paths I think one can take. Being your own boss, controlling your own destiny, and enjoying successes that you fully helped to create is an amazing thing. But there being no one to have your back, you being responsible for the livelihood of your staff and taking full responsibility for your company's failures can really be nerve-wracking and painful. But at the end of the day, though, I think being an entrepreneur does accelerate the learning process regarding a number of elements and skills that one ultimately needs to exceed and excel in a highly complex environment. Creativity is one of those that I really found you gain a deep appreciation for. I mean, it forces you, being an entrepreneur, to always be creative. I mean, an entrepreneur's mind revolves around new ideas constantly and opportunities for business. There's a continuous and conscious effort required in order to make things work and in order to get new business. I think, you really find the ability to spot and retain the best talent. I mean, your business is only as successful as the people who are working in it. Great leaders are those that create successful companies, and they have one thing in common. They surround themselves with talented, courageous, and loyal people. Once you've recruited great people, though, you really need to invest in their development. Otherwise, they're likely to leave for somewhere else. You quickly learn of the need to lead by example. I mean, being honest and ethical in everything you do is very important. Having strong values, live what you're preaching. If your staff don't see you as living up to these values, then how can you expect them to do the same? My dad, who ran his own company for a number of years, often told me, and I often told my own people, we're vendors and consultants. Behaviors of our customers' staff that will get them reprimanded will get us terminated. We have much higher standards that we have to live by each and every day. Additionally, you really need to develop leaders within your own organization, because at some point in being an entrepreneur, you're going to need to take some time off. Sometimes you'll be somewhere where you can't be reached or consulted on a problem. You need to be able to hand stuff off to the leaders you've developed, because if they can't do it, you might not have a customer when you return. You also need to really learn to assess how people perceive you. Your reputation with your clients and in your work community, and also at your own place of work, definitely will affect your team and how it operates, and the likelihood that you'll see repeat work and positive references. You need to check in every now and then to make sure your perception matches your goals. Be yourself, but be aware of how your team's and the public's perception of you is affecting your business. And ultimately, you'll learn not to waste people's time. I think people appreciate leaders who respect their time. And let's face it, time is money, and more so when it's your money. You need to find ways to communicate with your team that are fast, effortless, and effective. You need to allow your employees to work at ways they find the most efficient, whether that means alone, in a team, or even at home. The more you show that you respect people's time, the more your team will strive to meet your common goals, and the faster you'll get there.
Very well said, Ross. And I can completely relate to everything you suggested. Although my career path is a reverse scenario as yours, I started out in the corporate world and then got into entrepreneurship 10 years ago. The learnings I've acquired along the way, things such as, understanding business processes and structure, the art of leading and being led, and also appreciating the organizational dynamics in the corporate world are immensely valuable. Now, fast forward, you are the interim CIO and IT special advisor with Toronto Parking Authority. You joined the organization in the middle of a pandemic last year that saw a huge drop in revenue. Needless to say, there's no shortage of challenges. But what are your mandates and how are you progressing against them?
Well, my mandate was really twofold with the parking authority. So number one, they wanted to gain a deeper understanding and have me provide an informed evaluation of their technology department in relation to best practices and performance in the market. Additionally, I was also tasked to develop a multi-year innovative strategic technology roadmap that was aligned to business goals and their strategic customer-focused vision. Once I then got myself acclimatized and integrated into their teams, the original mandate organically expanded based on my experience to include vendor relationship management and executive thought leadership, working with the rest of the senior management team to help more effectively drive their strategic vision. As to progress, right now, progress on the original 2 items has been completed, and I was able to deliver those 2 pieces before the end of my original engagement, mid-December timeframe. Now I'm acting more in a strategic technology advisor role and a strategic leadership role to help manage and mentor the IT department, and also driving some of the procurement associated with the tech roadmap.
That sounds great, Ross. So I'd like to get your perspective on something that is extremely important for our CIO community right now. Oftentimes we hear from the senior IT leaders that their big mandate is to build the platform of the future, and they have to deliver on the world-class IT organization. I mean, those are really big mandates, even in the best of times. In your opinion, how can the CIO strike that balance between running the business of IT and driving innovation under the current conditions?
Well, I think we'd all agree that the current conditions are something none of us have ever really experienced before. And I think for most everyone, the next 12 months will without doubt be more unpredictable than usual. That said, though, I think 2 priorities will continue, which are protecting the bottom line and investing in resources and innovation that will drive growth. It's a tricky balance to strike at the best of times, let alone in the middle of a global health and economic crisis. I think all CIOs are right now, or they should be, well entrenched in working to balance productivity and innovation, and they will continue to keep a focused eye on this balance over the next year plus. Ultimately, each of us has to look at where we are currently in our innovation cycle with regards to specific initiatives and strategies. And then we have to decide whether we can afford to continue with the plans already in motion as they exist, or whether we're better off pulling back and either waiting or prolonging the delivery cycle. A lot of that is also really going to depend on what exactly is the innovation we're performing and how we're carrying it out. Was it being handled with an agile approach, or was it a big bang type thing? Is the innovation integrated into our everyday work in our departments across the company, or does our organization have dedicated innovation departments and teams? Ultimately, I think the right decision for each company will depend on the organizational structure, where we are in our cycles, and obviously budgetary constraints. I mean, if budgets are really tight or gutted, then a CIO ultimately needs to figure out what's the right balance for them and their company. Cost cutting is important. There's no doubt about that, especially in tough times. But so is investment in areas that will help our company to reach their long-term goals. I mean, personally, some of the ways that I'm looking to strengthen the business by balancing costs with investments are being realistic. I mean, record-breaking growth and profits and significant innovation likely aren't in the cards for 2021, at least for us. Right now, we're prioritizing our needs over our wants to make sure that we're equipped with the tools and technologies to get things done. I think number 2 is keeping an eye on income so we can start that much needed innovation in a timely fashion once things get better. 3, focusing on small I projects such as upgrades, enhancements, and internal data monetization, which we expect will drive significant short-term impact to our bottom line. Number 4 is invest in our team now, as there's a lot of operational effectiveness that we need to make before we can hope to deliver on the big I initiatives later on when the time is right. And 5, it's ensuring we're making time for those little I innovation projects and start building it into our team's DNA. For us, we've been way too long without it, And I'm worried that the team just doesn't have the culture and the recent experience to effectively deliver it and deal with the changes it's going to bring once we're able to get back to that big I focus.
Thank you, Ross. That's very valuable advice, especially drawing from your wealth of knowledge and experience from technology industry as well as across other industries over the years. So I really appreciate your sharing that. Um, I wanted to change gear a little bit. Something also interesting from our prior conversation that I learned from you is that you mentioned in your corporate career, you had worked for more women leaders than men. And that is really refreshing to hear. And sadly, also not very common. So I wanted to get your perspective. What is your key learnings and takeaway from working for women leaders? And how did those experiences shape your perspectives for building a diverse and inclusive team and becoming an advocate for women in technology?
That's a very good question, Nasheen. And I guess it is unusual having worked for more women than men in technology. I mean, especially for as long as I've been in the game, which is really since I could walk, having a dad who was a technology guy. I think, though, my key takeaway is that in order to be a truly great leader, you need a healthy balance of EQ and IQ. I heard somewhere that the job of a leader is not about being in charge, but taking care of those in our charge. It's about how do you help your people to be at their best and not just wringing the best out of them. I've personally found that women leaders are more emotionally intelligent than their male peers on average. I found that women are much better at connecting with their teams on an emotional level. And as such, their teams are more likely to gauge when emotions are influencing their decisions and thinking. And therefore, they're better able to quickly and effectively guide the path to more rational and impartial business decisions. I think additionally, I believe this higher EQ level makes one more self-aware. And I've personally found that female leaders I've worked for had more self-awareness than their male counterparts. They tended to be less overconfident of their abilities and more aware of their limitations. And as such, they tended to work harder on overcoming their weaknesses in order to improve. I mean, at the end of the day, in order to bring out the best in others, you first have to be able to work at bringing out the best in yourself. To that end, I think my ability to build better, higher performing teams was largely shaped and made more successful through having the opportunity and benefit to learn from a host of great women leaders. Ensuring a high level of emotional intelligence, I think, gives teams those skills that they need to work more effectively together, to learn from their mistakes, and know that they're not always going to get punished. As to advocating for women in technology, to be honest, I didn't realize I'd been doing it until I attended one of, and actually it may have been the very first, We for She conference in BC, hosted by the Women's Executive Network there back in 2014. As one of less than a dozen men in the room of a couple hundred of female leaders at all levels from all industries, I heard a lot of first-person accounts of challenges women face in the working world, and not just in technology, and also did a lot of group work with them as to understand how we can work together to change things. I also came to understand and appreciate that more we as a society could and should be doing to help advocate for increased inclusion of women in leadership positions, particularly at the executive level. At the time, I had already built my executive team, and such that it was made up of more than 50% women. And I was also mentoring a handful of junior female leaders at the time. But I honestly don't think I was being an advocate. I just knew from experiences that team enjoyed more success with a good balance of both men and women working together. It wasn't a conscious 1, 2, 3, 4 men. Okay, I need to go get 4 women to balance this team. It was just who have I got so far? What do I need? And who's best suited to help achieve the results we want? Attending that event really opened my eyes to the fact that I could do more and openly advocate more, because to me, the benefits were just plainly there to see. To be honest, once I did become more aware of the imbalance out there, my continued involvement with that group, as well as joining other women's technology groups out in BC, was a bit selfish because I have 3 daughters and I don't want them or anyone else to ever have to face a situation where they're held back from reaching their goals just because of their gender.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ross, for this sincere and honest discussion. And I agree, there's in fact scientifically proven that teams with more women and teams that are more diverse and inclusive in general perform much better than the teams that don't.
You're right on that.
I really appreciate this conversation. It's both informative and enlightening. Thank you so much for joining me again, Ross.
Thank you, Nasheen. I really appreciate your time. And hey, best of luck in your endeavors this year.
Thank you. You've been watching another episode of Executive Insights by the IT Media Group. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video, please check out other content on our YouTube channel, including CIO roundtable videos and executive interviews. And don't forget to subscribe.